Okay, so here we are back in our large unified room. Hopefully folks enjoyed the two sessions in the separate rooms. Seemed, based on the Twitter stream, to be great content in both rooms. We're going to now move on to a session on programmatic. And as we're a little bit behind, I am going to turn things over to Michael Nicholas, who will be moderating for us today, and let him take over the reins.
We'll talk twice as fast because we're behind. Obviously, the session's about programmatic. You've read what it's about in your program, ironically. But you know, it's one of these things where people talk about it a lot, and I think it's seemingly maybe a bit complex for people. And the idea here is to not have a very massively deep dive about what's happening inside of each pipe, but really to come together and sort of say, there's two things we want to cover today. A high-level overview about what it is and why it's good. And really, the second thing that we kind of talked about as a group was, why do you care? And we felt like if we could kind of accomplish those two things, that we'd have a nice panel today. So to do that, we brought together some people who range from exchanges to agency trading desks to demand-side platforms, and they're really, really smart, or at least that's what they tell me. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, but this is Ernie, and you can sort of go from there.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everyone. Ernie Cormier, CEO of Nexage. Very happy to be here. Nexage is a premium mobile ad exchange. We've been around for 4 or 5 years. One of the pioneers in programmatic. We actually were the lead author on the very first spec of OpenRTB Mobile 1.0 back in, well, we wrote it in the fourth quarter of 10 and released it in February of 11, along with 7 or 8 of our, I guess, competitors / cooperators in the industry. It's kind of the nature of the business. So very happy to be here and looking forward to the panel.
My name's Michael Collins. I'm the CEO of Adelphic. We are a mobile demand-side platform and audience solution. It's our role to be the buying platform to let brands and agencies find the audience to look to engage and to be able to gauge them and track the results and be smarter about it going forward.
And I'm Jason Pope. I'm the VP of Mobile at AOD, which is really the trading desk for VivaKi and the Publicis agencies. My role is I'm really focused on mobile and building out the product and partnerships for that group. But really, we span kind of cross-channel, across all the digital channels.
Excellent. So all very smart, again, as they tell me. One of the things that you know, I usually like to say to people is, and it's not my quote, it's Einstein's quote, and it goes something to the effect of, if you don't understand something, you can't explain it simply, or something to that effect. So what I've now decided to do is, I'll give each of you 15 seconds. I'd like you to tell me simply, what is programmatic? Jason, you're up.
All right, 15 seconds. So to me, programmatic is about audience buying, obviously, but it's beyond that. I think it's about buying audiences at the right place, at the right time, on the right screen. And packaging that up in a way that you're no longer just thinking about sites, but you're thinking about who's my right audience profile and where do I need to reach them.
Michael, can you top it?
Yeah, and I think that's very good. I think the only other thing to add is that programmatic's the automated trading and optimization of digital media to bring greater efficiency and effectiveness to the ad spend.
Ernie, nail it.
So I'll take a different perspective. I agree with all of that. That was mostly from the buy side. I'll take more of a supply side view. Programmatic allows the efficiencies that were mentioned, but also a lot of control. Control that you don't get otherwise, so you don't get non-programmatic channels. And it's important to remember programmatic is an umbrella that really represents several different means of trading, real-time bidding or RTB being the most dominant today, but programmatic direct coming on fast.
Okay, that's good. You know, another thing that I spend a lot of time in different venture capitalist offices, et cetera, and a lot of time when you're talking with them, they really sort of want to hear one thing, which is, what are you solving? What's the problem? What is the problem that programmatic is solving very simply? Ernie, I'm going right back at you.
So I'm going to keep it specific to mobile. Within mobile, because of the nature of the data model, it's very difficult to do any kind of audience buying at scale. You don't have the third-party cookies. You don't have the prevalence of data on the buy side. You don't have the ability for the trading desks to easily bring their data sets to bear because of the lack of the cookie. So what the problem we're trying to solve is to be able to do audience buying at scale, and then again on the pub side, to be able to manage all that with control.
Michael?
Sure. Well, ultimately it comes down to effectiveness and efficiency, but probably a more a broader way to look at it is that when technology gets introduced in marketplaces, it brings greater efficiency and brings transparency. It did that with, with equities, with fixed income, with commodities, with airline tickets, you name it. That same technology that's establishing these automated markets is now coming into advertising. It's now coming into digital media. So that same level of transparency and efficiency is, ironically, it's been slow to come to a digital market like digital advertising, but that's finally arriving. And when you can bring the audience data on top of it, the intelligence that comes with it is also enhanced. So what all of that leads up to is greater effectiveness, greater return on the advertising spend.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I think it's a lot about scale and efficiency, but it's also about context, right? So how are potential consumers behaving, and not based on some maybe outside data, but on what's actually happening. And for mobile, that's about mobile behavior or location behavior. And I think that's specifically for mobile, I think that's a key part of the value proposition.
Okay, so you guys all really like each other because you're in mad agreement all the time. I'm not doing a good job up here.
Yeah.
We got to get this going a little bit. Jason, I'm going to go right back at you. More of a demand side question, and then Ernie can come in and bomb it out. But I think some of the things we talk about, agencies and brands, you deal with both of them. Are they trying to do the same things? Do they ask the same questions? I think this is always the thing. It's like the agencies come in and they're trying to do one thing and they have a little bit of an angle. And maybe if you talk directly to a brand, they're actually asking something slightly different, or they have different interests. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, I mean, from my point of view, kind of working within a trading desk capacity, I'm a little bit sheltered from what the brands are actually asking for. But I would say that the agencies are interested in looking good and in doing the right thing for their clients, right? And they want to innovate as well. So, and I think programmatic fits in pretty nicely in all that. Whether those KPIs are always aligned, I'm not totally sure. But I do know that the agencies are looking for the next big thing, and this is definitely kind of fits the bill.
Michael, what do you see?
Well, it's interesting being a former agency guy and now being on the sell side. And also having spent a lot of time as a consultant, it's the role of an agency is very similar to the role of any consultant, whether it be a outside law firm or tax accountancy or you name it, which is the brands have a very specific business focus on their products. Bringing in those outside expertise to help them do their job better so they can focus on their core day-to-day is that's a very natural part of business, and it's not just on the marketing side. It can really stretch across every aspect of business. So I think what the role of an agency, ultimately they're trying to solve the same marketing problem. But I think the role of an agency plays is that they bring that deep level of expertise that any one company, any one brand would have a lot of difficulty building up by themselves. So again, the same reason why you'd hire an outside law firm or a tax accountancy or you name it. It's very tough for a brand to have that same deep level of expertise and capability by themselves as standalone.
But they're generally after the same thing, you think. There's no disconnect there. There's a lot of talk about this.
Marketing a brand is marketing a product is marketing a product. How much of that you want to do in-house versus how much of that you want to look for outside expertise, where that line can be drawn.
But when they're speaking with you guys, and Ernie, jump in here, are they asking for the same things, or is it slightly different? I always think that's kind of an interesting thing. The agency is representing the brand in theory, but they're trying to do it, as Jason said, they're trying to look good, and then, is it different? Or is it the same? It's fine for it to be the same.
I mean, I don't have any agency background. I do have brand background in previous lives working for, in my case, for Virgin.
Yep.
And I think that you're at the top level and even kind of the mid-level, all the goals are the same. Underneath, there's, of course, that tension that comes with any business relationship where you're trying to optimize relationship, optimize the dollar flow, have transparency into what's getting spent where. And that can lead to, I don't want to call it conflict, that's too strong a word, but it can lead to different questions being asked, to use your terminology.
Yes, that's kind of what I was getting at. All right, see, Ernie's brave. This is good. Okay, slight redirect. Okay, so everybody up here is in violent agreement that programmatic is genius, and they've all told me again that they're very smart. So here's the question. Why isn't everybody in the agency doing it? Why isn't everybody doing it in mobile? Why is the uptake the way it is, at least in volume or even in the rate of uptake? Ernie, why don't you go right back at it?
I think there are so many different, we can look at any switch of medium or any switch of technology within a medium, and there's always a lag time. There's always inertia. There are always guys who are at the end of their career who are just trying to hope to get to retirement before they have to change the way they do things. So there are all these kind of human factors that go on. But beyond that, I mean, all the data that we have shows or indicates anyway that programmatic is going to be a dominant trading type, very much. Kind of putting, even when you have, especially when you have programmatic direct, such that you're able to bring programmatic direct to the direct sales process, it's hard to imagine any non-programmatic, again, using the broad umbrella now, not RTB, but the broad umbrella of programmatic. It's hard for me to imagine anything being done non-programmatically within 3-4 years.
I think we all agree with that. The question is, right now, is it inventory? Is it agency operations? Is it why isn't it? You know, we all talk about the moon, and we all talk about trajectory. Jason, what do you think's going on?
Yeah, well, I think there's kind of two different questions there. Like one is, why isn't more money moving to programmatic? And why isn't more money moving to mobile specifically?
Because we all agree it's awesome. So
It's pretty awesome. I think just in programmatic in general, I think a lot of it has to do with operations and how media gets planned today. There's a lot of legacy kind of wrapped around all that. And there's still, you know, a lot of unknowns in terms of how to buy programmatically, right? It's a lot easier to go out to a network or go out to some publisher and buy a bunch of impressions, and that's like easy to understand. It's a lot harder to go out and think about, okay, I want to buy this audience across thousands of apps or websites or whatever they are. That's a bit of a challenge. And then, you know, for mobile specifically, I think, you know, a big question for a lot of people is like, why aren't more dollars moving to mobile or as quickly as we thought that it would? And I think that, you know, people are still trying to understand how to measure mobile. There's still a lot of challenges around attribution and linking it to other channels. There's not a lot of advertisers out there that truly kind of understand that whole cycle, right? So how do I just run a mobile campaign, and how do I measure it? What's the right KPIs? I mean, consumers are behaving obviously much different on mobile devices than they are in even a desktop environment. And that poses a lot of challenges to the average buyer.
Michael, what do you think? I mean, you've seen it all sides. So what's the
Sure.
story
Well,
there?
I think I finally found something on the panel to disagree with, but it's not with my panelists. It's something you mentioned earlier about the about mobile being, or about programmatic being slow in the uptake. I don't know this. I don't know this for sure, but I bet if we could dig up the data, I bet we would see programmatic. The uptake for programmatic is faster than what happened with search, faster than what happened with social, probably even faster than what happened with online.
I believe that.
So yes, it is slow for all the reasons Jason mentioned. I think there is, you know, you can't snap your fingers and remake how media planning is done. And switching from I bought this property to, you know, we're going to do audience-based buying on a cost-plus basis across these 1,000 properties. I mean, that is infrastructure. That is a fundamental shift, and that will happen. But the benefits of it are clear. It works. Yep. And again, I think we are going to see the uptake surpass what we saw for social, for online, for many channels. So we'd all like to see it go faster. I think compared to what has come before it, I think it is moving along quite well.
So let's take it to the house. Show of hands. Majority of your mobile spend is programmatic. Raise your hand. Sorry, dude. Anyway, so and I'm going to sort of fill in a little bit of blank. Is a little bit. I mean, I was trying to get at, you know, is it really an inventory issue? Is it an agency you know, is it the agency's fault because we're not quite ready to sort of redefine what we're doing at that exact moment? Is it the fact that we all look at it and say there's not enough inventory? I thought you made some really interesting points, Jason, to kind of wrap it up, which is funny because you said, I think you said, well, we can't operationalize doing more of it, and yet we can't measure it. Well, if we did more of it, we'd be able to measure more. So there's clearly something in here that's not quite happening yet, and that was more what I was alluding to. I guess it's a little bit of a mystery still. Maybe we'll get to it later.
Yeah.
Okay. On that note, let's talk about mobile just in general. Everybody in here is clearly familiar with it because, well, you're here. As mobile marketers, or just as marketers, mobile's been a challenge for a long time. And you alluded to this a little bit, not only in measurement, but just kind of the approach. And actually, it was just said earlier, like how people consume. People are in their bubbles. People have created their cocoon. They don't really like to be kind of intruded on in their little bubble. How will programmatic either help that for brands or make it worse? Ernie.
Well, the areas that programmatic will help are more, if you have to start the creative side, really. If you want to talk about breaking through the bubble and being helpful and additive rather than disruptive. So you have to start at the creative side, and of course the targeting that you want to go along with it, so that the targeting is well received. programmatic will help in terms of, as new programmatic and especially as native becomes more well-defined and programmatic helps with native, it will help in terms of deploying that creative more efficiently. I don't think there's, I mean, unless I'm missing something, I don't see anything kind of at the first order intrinsic about programmatic that will help engagement. It's really more the piping underneath and how you can do it more efficiently. But there's a lot of work. I mean, back to some of the pieces around measurement and attribution, we're like in the second inning here, maybe the top of the second inning. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of finishing off all the work. And if you look back in the late 90s, early 2000s when online was coming, it took us a lot longer back then than it's taking us in mobile to figure out how to do it. So we definitely are moving faster and learned our lessons and have learned our lessons. But that's the way I would answer. It's really more of a creative challenge, and then how does that creative get deployed?
Michael, what do you think?
I think one of...
How's it an advantage? How does it help reach people in meaningful ways? How does it help not have that disruption happen?
It's interesting. Saying it's disruptive, saying that advertising is disruptive. It is, it hasn't slowed any other channel down. And I would actually say advertising in mobile is perhaps less disruptive, because if you're on an app or if you're on a mobile web page, you are going to see one ad. If you go to the home page of ESPN, you're going to see 3 or 4, much higher percentage of the screen. And if you're watching broadcast television, every 7 minutes of every 30 is going to be stuff you can't get around. Full screen takeover running television. So I'm not fully convinced that mobile advertising is more disruptive than is any other channel. In fact, I think you could argue that in fact it's less. I also think right now, as the general consumers have an assumption that I get this content for free because there's an advertisement on the page. I get the nightly news on my television for free because there's advertising. For the people who don't like that, you get HBO. You watch PBS. I mean, there are alternatives out there. The general public is still migrating in much larger numbers to those free ad-supported channels. So I think there is a implicit understanding of that trade-off. That said, going back to the relevance, I think one of the things digital advertising, and now including mobile, brings is a much higher degree of relevancy of advertising to consumer. If the ads being thrown at consumer really have nothing to do or no interest for their daily life, the engagement rates are going to drop, the spend's going to drop. So I think the more relevant it can be, once in a while, hey, you really may see an ad that's useful to you. If you're in the market for a car, you may want to know what's coming out soon. You may want to know what's interesting. If you're planning a trip, whatever it may be. So I think greater targeting, greater data is going to add greater relevance to those ads, which, in that trade-off of advertising for content, it will make it more palatable, if not
That's kind of what I was getting at. I wouldn't doubt that if we looked at the instances of interruption, that your point is absolutely correct. It's probably fewer, but I was more kind of getting at the way we consume and what we expect in our little bubble is different than what we expect when we're watching television. The expectations are slightly different. But I think you're bringing up really good points about the context, location, buying car. These things programmatically can really help where it seems to be more in line. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have an opportunity in mobile to have the best consumer experience because of context and timeliness and location and all that stuff. I think one of the biggest opportunities in this space right now, would agree with Ernie, is creative. I think it's a totally underutilized asset in mobile, at least from my perspective. Yep. I mean, we're still doing a lot of stuff where we're, repurposing some horrible static display ad that's getting resized for mobile. So I think
Shrink and link, as we like to call it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we're on the cusp of seeing a lot more development around mobile creative, rich media, crossing over into video, and trying to create an experience for consumer that's mobile-centric. And to me, that's kind of the biggest missing gap right now, because I think that we've made such progress in terms of targeting and understanding consumers and location and behavior and all that stuff. I think the next big step is, let's make the experience good on the actual phone or the tablet or whatever.
So follow-up. Okay, I mean, I asked this question a little while ago. What's slowing us down? Okay, creative development is slowing us down. What are the challenges? What are the challenges? Why isn't creative being developed with this in the front, in the forethought? It seems to be developed as an afterthought. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is that, it's a dollars and cents issue, right? So it's still mobile as a piece of even the digital pie is still relatively small, right? So there's not a lot of upfront development of creative by the creative agencies. That's changing, but I think that's still kind of the case today, to a big extent. You know, and I think there's other parties that need to get involved in that experience too. Like we're trying to get more involved in the whole creative asset development, and you know, pushing a lot harder on, hey, let's build a mobile ad. Let's not repurpose a display ad.
I mean, you're bringing up a point here, and maybe not everybody here works in an advertising agency, but in general, whoever brings the biggest pile of money to the table amongst all of our, you know, people we work with generally gets the most attention. So what we're saying is the relative spend in mobile is actually compounding this issue a little bit, because the TV guy is going to get what he's going to get, the display guy is going to get even the search guy, and ultimately as it goes down. So there isn't necessarily the production dollars there to version and really take advantage of what can be done there.
Yep.
So that's an interesting problem. I don't know if we have any answers. Anybody have any answers for that?
Well, I think the simplest answer is time. This is all going to follow consumer usage. And every survey, every metric, every way of measuring, as you put it, in our bubble, which also, let's remember, that bubble's only been around for, you know, the iPhone was introduced in 2007, so let's give it a year or two, so let's call it 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
That's a pretty new bubble as it comes from media in our world. Yep. So, you know, I think it's time. There are pieces that get solved, and no one has a magic wand, or, you know, I'm sure it'll get waived. It takes time to solve these problems.
Go ahead.
And just to add, to put some more context around it, and I do fully agree with Ernie, even just the labor pool, the number of executive creative directors out there who are, you know, like mobile ECDs, it's, you know, it's still this is all new. It's still learning this new labor pool. All that said, you know, we shouldn't forget that the engagement rates on mobile are still 2 to 10x what they are in online. So even with a early medium where there's still a lot of improvement to go, it's still easier to get somebody engaged on a mobile device than it is on a PC.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody would doubt that. I think, you know, one of the questions I was going to ask, I'm not so super sure that it's relevant, as I asked this to somebody the other day, I said, who is your typical client, and what's their title? And I'll go to Jason. We'll give this a try. And
yeah. So you know, again, we're really just working with the Publicis Group agencies, you know, and we're working with those digital account teams. And we're getting, you know, more exposure at higher levels there, which is good. But I think, you know, there's still a lot of planning and fairly big decision making happening at, you know, kind of mid-level, you know, titles. So, you know, we're trying to get a bigger seat at the table. But I think, you know, like I said, you're typically talking about kind of some big digital budget, and then that's being set at pretty high level, right? Then it's getting carved up a little bit further down the line.
CMO definitely knows what the digital budget is.
Right. And then beyond that, you've got, you know, some decision making happening at lower levels, and I think that's what we're trying to push on a little bit harder, is how do we get a bigger piece of that pie, and how do we get some higher exposure within not only the agencies but also the clients directly.
Michael, what do you think?
My typical client is sitting to my left. And
That's right.
our products, you know, we create those, you know, we create the platform, the tools, we hand it over to people like Jason and his team for the trading desk, so they can execute campaigns, so they can build up and own their audience, and bring that efficiency in house. I think it's one of the great changes that Programmatic has brought on, is that, you know, now the agencies can take control. They can be optimizing across a huge number of titles. They can own that audience and then have that asset that they can leverage across for that one client or across multiple clients, depending on privacy regulations. So we tend to work with trading desks who are, or other agency teams who are looking to have that platform through which they can engage an audience.
So let me, and I'm not skipping you, Ernie, but you're going to get right back in this. But I'm going to sort of press on this a little bit in this way. We all agree that it's great. It's awesome, it's unbelievable, it's life-changing in what Programmatic can do. And at the same time, we say we have a hard time getting a seat at the table. Is it the way that we talk about it? Is it the way that we explain it? Is it the way that, why doesn't the CMO of McDonald's care about what we're talking about right now? Ernie, what do you think? You can pass.
Yeah, I mean, my clients are these two guys sitting right here.
I know you guys are all, my point is you're all talking to each other.
Well, I don't know if that's really true. I mean, again, I understand the point of a provocative question, but I do think there's just a matter of this is still a nascent world, and it's going to take time. I don't know that it's true, by the way, that the CMO at McDonald's doesn't care about Programmatic. If my guess is that he or she is probably certainly at least conscious of it. Whether he or she is kind of in the trenches working it, I'm sure that's not the case. But you guys are much closer.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the advertiser. I mean, there's some advertisers that this is a pretty big piece of their business, right? If they're trying to if app installs is a big piece of their business, right? This is
Anything
obviously
services.
really important. It really depends on what they're doing. I think we've gotten some really great acceptance as mobile as a branding vehicle, and I think we kind of missed out on a lot of the legacy issues with programmatic that were kind of coming out of display, which is this thought of remnant inventory and really focused only on DR. I think mobile missed a lot of that, which is a good thing. Display kind of had to learn those learnings, and we benefited from that. So I think it's becoming more and more important. I think for the average advertiser that's thinking about branding or thinking about some sort of e-commerce transaction or some sort of back-end ROI, I think the biggest issue that we're still running through is attribution and tracking, right? Like, what's the real impact of mobile, and how are these people going on through other channels to actually transact with my product?
I can tell you that 70% of the spend on our platform in December was brand. Now, I'm saying brand, a type of advertiser.
Yeah.
Many of them were doing calls to action, so you could call it performance.
Right.
But I mean, we're seeing that brand spend come in now.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I was listening to these guys talk. I was thinking about, like, does the CMO of McDonald's care? And I'm actually starting to err on, I don't know the CMO of McDonald's, but if you start looking at what's going around the industry, Unilever has established their own audience buying desk. Geico has and brought it in-house.
Yep.
AT&T has established their own. Many of the largest brands in the country and the world, I think, not only care, they're doing something about it. They're taking very definitive action. Unilever set up their own trading desk within their agency, but because they didn't want anybody else to get advantage of their volume other than Unilever. Many of the large brands around Publicis are working with Jason and his team to get that benefit. So I'm not, again, I don't know the CMO of McDonald's, but if you look at brands of that size, I think a lot of them not only care, they're actively doing things about it.
Okay, no, that's good. That's good. Okay, pushback. I like that. That's good. All right, let's shift gears a little bit, and maybe get a little bit more supply side. How about that? That'd be good, right? Okay, so how does programmatic change how you think about what you do on supply side, or how you explain it? Because we talked a little bit about moving from using sites or pages as proxies for audiences versus now having real audiences to sell. How do you describe that, and what do you think the impact of that is?
So, well, there's kind of I'll start segueing from that point. So the way that our publishers are looking at programmatic in terms of audience is that it's forcing them, or let's say helping them, to understand their own audiences a lot better. And as opposed to relying upon their context to sell, they're being led to, whatever tools they're using, being led to understand their own audience so that they can market that as an audience. Now, of course, the good brands are still marketing that within the context. They're not, no one, and nor should they be walking away from the context. That context still has value. Segueing from that, though, to kind of back to the broader programmatic piece, what we're seeing from publishers, and we have publishers like National Football League and Univision and Rovio and quite a stretch, is that it's the point I mentioned a while ago. They're getting control over what happens. They're getting transparency throughout the process. Their ability to set who gets to see what and how I get to present that, and what price do I get to present that at, and how do I monetize without kind of violating my business rules? How do I manage channel conflict? These are all things that programmatic brings to the table that there's nothing else out there that allows the publishers to have that kind of control.
So for the first time, really real audiences, as opposed to using content as a proxy for audience. Like we do it on TV. We buy the show because the ratings say this. We buy it as a proxy for an audience. But it's not really an audience. It's actually a show. Demand side, guys, what do you guys think about this? What's the effect of this?
I think it's a fundamental shift, and I agree with, I certainly agree with the control point, but I think your point of television is a great one. I was on a panel with the head of sales of one of the TV networks, and they said, of course you're going to buy from us. Where else can you buy X show, 2.5 Men, Grey's Anatomy, whatever it was? Like, we're the only place where you can buy that show. It was really interesting. It's like, they're the only place that have that show, but I can buy that show's audience in about 100 other places. And the show's not purchasing stuff. It's the people watching the show purchasing the stuff. So one of the great things programmatic, again, depending on where you work, either great or scary or both, programmatic brings to the table. So now I can buy the New York Times audience on the New York Times, on the AP, on a RSS news feeder app, and it would be the same person, or the exact same person, the same profile, and the price difference is about 100-fold. So now not only can I reach that same audience anywhere, I can start measuring the difference of, is it worth the $40 CPM on the New York Times or the $6 CPM on the AP or the 40-cent CPC on that newsreader app? They all may have value, but now I think we have the ability to seamlessly, test, try, and on a real-time basis figure out where the dollars best spent. So I think that big shift from buying a property, buying content, to buying audience really shifts the balance of power back to the buyer and away from the publisher. So again, that transparency is going to come in. The value of the content being sold is now evident and measurable, and that's a very fundamental shift.
Jason, what do you think on the agency side? Are they sitting here going, great, we finally have audiences, or have they thought they've had audiences all along?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the things that's really kind of telling for the space is now that you're starting to see some really big publishers, like premium publishers, are jumping into this space, right? They weren't doing that a year or two ago. And, I think to Ernie's point, a lot of that's based on control, right? Understanding what's coming from the demand side, dealing with those channel conflict issues with their direct sales teams. And we're seeing more and more of that, which I think is really, really kind of an important kind of shift in the space, and really making it a lot more accessible or digestible for people to understand, okay, we're going after premium content now, but we're doing it based on context and based on buying audiences.
So that actually brings us into a point I wanted to sort of probe with you guys a little bit. So if you have worked in one of these agency-type devices, you spend a lot of time calling people to make sure that your thing, video piece thing, is inside that bigger thing that you want, 2.5 Men, Super Bowl, whatever. So for years, okay, let's go to the CMO of McDonald's. They've been doing that forever. They expect that context, and Ernie brought this up a little bit on the side too. And I think people feel like programmatic audience, we don't care about context, and actually that thing you've been doing for so long doesn't matter. How does programmatic actually handle that? I think it's a myth. Let's debunk it.
Right.
So how does programmatic, I don't think it's an or, it's an and. How does programmatic actually handle that?
Yeah, I do. Well, just like all things, nothing is absolute, right? So buying audience and the value of context is clearly well documented, well understood. That doesn't mean, however, that context is gone away, or that the idea of brand safe environments for brands that care about that is gone away. So from a buy side, if you're a brand, you still care very much about, is my ad showing up in a brand safe environment, something that's consistent with my brand. So
Or I can borrow equity from it, whatever it is.
Exactly. So which is not at all to diminish the audience part of it at all. I think there's more of a, okay, is that my audience, and is this a brand safe environment? And I do think there are ways within programmatic, and certainly we're providing some ways and trying hard to provide better ways to kind of verify that brand safe environment for the advertiser.
Jason, what do you think is happening on the agency side? Do they even understand that?
Yeah.
How do they think about it?
I mean, this is a big issue for us, right? Because we're working with, Publicis Group agencies that have these huge clients that can't just be running anywhere, right? So, so vetting and understanding that we're running on brand safe environments is super important to us. And now there's a lot of great tools to do that, right? So we have kind of a whole process that we use, and we use some third-party vendors to help with that, to ensure that we're only running on kind of,
I'll push it a little harder. Forget brand safe. What about brand relevance? We're looking for some synergy here. We're really, like we do in everything else on the phone, we're calling people. We're looking to try and create that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of the whole demand side game, right? And having the right partners that can understand, for us, mobile audiences and how they're behaving in mobile.
What a perfect segue to Mr. Michael.
Which is why.
Nice escape.
Again, it was interesting. I think the whole idea of I don't think that's fully trickled down to the idea of buying audiences, but context is and has been one of the major drivers of performance, but it's not the only driver of performance. And even if you look at the New York Times, I read the New York Times every morning on my way to work. My 16-year-old nephew reads it on his way to school. If you're buying just the New York Times, you're getting both of us, and we're not in the market for too many of the same things. So I think even if you are looking to buy premium content in a brand safe environment, what programmatic could bring is making sure you're getting, you're not just buying the title, you're buying the audience and the most effective engagements within that context. So even if you're setting up a brand safe list within these 10 properties, or within this one property, what the RTB nature of programmatic can bring to it is just, again, making sure you're getting the best return for wherever those ads are running.
And getting the audience within that context.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's draw some limits. I mean, brand relevance might be going kind of a bridge too far, right? I mean, I think that's the world of direct sales. If you're really looking for brand relevance with your ad dollars, I do think that's, and this is one of the reasons why I don't think direct sales is ever going to go away.
Yeah,
is because I think that's a direct sales world.
But if I'll give an example. So let's say I work for Nike, and I want to be in sporting content. I mean, it's less about safe and not safe. It's more about relevance of the content and being able to program that.
Oh, that's doable.
So that's what I'm trying to.
That's absolutely doable.
Absolutely, I agree. So we have a couple more minutes left. We're going to finish up here, and then we want to do about a 10-minute Q&A, so you can really ask them all the hard stuff, which I haven't been asking them.
And you can pay attention to your timekeeper here. I don't think we have 10 minutes.
Yeah, we got about 10, right? We got about 10. Yeah, why don't we? That was actually pretty good. I had a couple more, but we'll wrap it up on that. Does anybody have any questions for this, supply side, demand side, agency side? Don't ask me anything. Mr. Gibson.
I just have a question, probably for the larger group. I don't know if it's any specific individual, but I was kind of looking back at my notes here when everybody was talking about the definition of programmatic. And what I found was interesting was that everybody seemed to agree it was about audience buying, it was about control. And then also there was a lot of discussion about, well, how do we get programmatic to the bigger seat on the table? How do we get it for exposure? And I think what I'm hearing and what I've seen talking to people, that programmatic does kind of right now live in this sort of small end of the spectrum where you have planning, you have strategy, you have your communication goals, and then it comes down to buying. That's when programmatic gets involved. But then after that, you also have your analytics and then your post-campaign wrap-up, and it loops back up to the planning team again. With this planning and control, the audience buying, you're using data to do that, which is great, and that's why people love it. But planning also uses data. Analytics also uses data. When is this process going to become more seamlessly connected? And do you think that's when programmatic will then get its bigger seat on the table, where we're not just talking about buyers, but programmatic then maybe helps link these different processes together? And will there be a day where you have programmatic strategy, a programmatic plan?
Yeah, I mean, I could take a quick shot at that. So I think that's a great question, and I think that's one of the things that we're kind of working through now, right? Because the challenge for us still today is, still to some degree we're operating in silos by channel, right? You got mobile buys programmatically and display buys and social, and linking all this stuff together is not seamless yet. I mean, it's just not. So I think that's kind of part of closing up that whole ecosystem is linking all those different channels together, and that takes things like having a unified DMP that can really track data across all these different channels, and then you have data flowing into the system that you can aggregate along with campaign data and really have kind of a system like you're talking about, right? That's based on true performance with attribution across all these different channels, and then planning against those metrics. If I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I think Jason hit on the big point. Is that right now agencies are still operating, not just agencies, the marketing world is still operating on a channel-centric view. We have an online plan, a mobile plan, a broadcast plan, a print plan. That, before we all know it, that's all going to shift very, very quickly to an audience-focused buy, to an audience-focused approach that goes across channels. Consumers aren't single channel. They don't live their life by, today I'm a broadcast consumer, tomorrow I'm an online consumer. There is one consumer, there is one brand. So as we shift to an audience-focused approach to marketing across multiple screens, I would agree that upfront data that's used for planning, right now this is who we think is going to buy the product. Let's go find the places where we think we can reach these people. It's two layers of abstraction. Once we are in an audience buying construct, we'll be able to move very quickly to, these are our audience goals. This is the messaging we want to get out at different points of the purchase funnel.
Right.
Go message. And that's a fundamental shift, and that is happening. That will happen very quickly, and again, it's going to change the roles all the way down. I think it's going to streamline the process all the way from channel planning. It's kind of going to go away.
I don't disagree at all. I think those are brilliant answers. To take a different lens to the question, again, programmatic's an umbrella. RTB was the first instantiation. Programmatic Direct is coming, not really here quite yet, but coming. Really, the next stage is going to be Programmatic Guaranteed, which is where you are reaching deeper, both up into the planning, so that you can get commitments around media done programmatically, commitments around inventory done programmatically, and then deeper into the pub side, so you can get commitments and block out inventory for buys. So, and that involves a lot of workflow. It'll kind of reach out into that planning. Now, within mobile, there's no one doing real programmatic guarantee today. These are all things that are on the whiteboards for product roadmaps for next year. Back to the point about it takes time, but it'll be coming.
So the answer is soonish.
Soonish, yeah. Real soon now.
Other questions, sir?
Kind of two questions, not related. One question is, what's the current percentage of mobile spend in programmatic? How is that? The second question is, more data you feed into the platform, the better you can programmatic. How do you draw the buying balance?
That's one of the questions I actually didn't ask today, but anyway. Who wants to take the number?
So the first question was, go ahead.
Everybody's got a different number, so let's see.
Yeah, I mean, the first question was kind of percent of spend on mobile. I think it varies a lot by advertiser, but I'd say generally speaking, once you've got kind of that digital spend carved out, I think mobile's, kind of in the 10% range of that right now. It's growing quickly. In fact, I hope I think by the end of this year, it'll be closer to 20. But we'll see. And then the second question was
Privacy. So as programmatic starts to get smarter and smarter, Skynet, how do we not feel, you know that feeling when you look at something in one platform and all of a sudden you see a Facebook ad for it or vice versa, and you kind of get that feeling?
yeah.
That creepy feeling.
That feeling. How do we not go over that edge?
Well, I think there's still some work to be done, particularly in mobile on proper opting out. We've got this challenge with this kind of cookieless environment or partially cookieless environment. So it's much bigger challenge to offer kind of a unified opt-out process, right? Like you can't even in desktop. And then I think the other part of this is consumers, right, and getting used to this. I think we've all been kind of acclimating to it slowly over time, right? I mean, Amazon, Zappos, a lot of these companies do a really great job remarketing, and we're seeing ads pop up after we've looked at a pair of shoes on Zappos.
Yep.
2 days later when you're just surfing on some website. And I think it's the same for mobile, right? I mean,
Does it sort of self-heal, the fact that like it's showing it and we don't like it, we're opting out by not clicking it, and in fact it won't come back again if we see those thresholds, right? I mean, it's sort of...
But let's separate creepy from privacy, right?
Yes.
And I'm not trying to diminish the
Yep.
creepiness of creepy. But privacy, I do think that we can do a lot to respect privacy, and although there is no universal opt-out, obviously, ironically enough, in mobile, in order to opt out, you actually have to be tracked, unlike online, where it's a lot easier to do with a cookie. So, I mean, there is kind of a degree there. Back to the question about the mobile spend, a lot of forecasts, eMarketer, for example, forecasts that by the end of 17 into 18, mobile will exceed digital. I think part of your question may also have been how much of that is programmatic within the mobile spend. I can only speak to our platform, which of course is skewed, but in our platform this month, about 65% of the spend through our platform is programmatic.
And one last thing on privacy, I think there is still a very, very long way to go, but what the fundamental key of it is to allow the consumer to have control. I think in the online world and the desktop world, they've made great progress with the DAA and with companies like Evidon, where consumers, next time you see an online ad, look for that little eye in the corner. When you click on it, it gives the full opt-out capability. Making sure consumers have control is kind of the baseline. That's just now coming over to mobile with companies like Evidon and Trusty, giving that opt-out capability. On your iPhone now, for all of you who have iPhone, if you didn't know, there is a setting in your iPhone that you can set for Do Not Track.
But please don't.
7.1.
Yeah. Right, for 7.1 and above. So it's
except you'll still get ads, they'll just be bad ads.
Yeah, if the industry isn't good at providing that consumer opt-out, all of us in the industry should know that the government will do this for us. Yeah. So there is a very strong incentive on behalf of the industry to make sure consumer privacy is protected, because if we don't do it, somebody's going to do it for us.
On the
But again, many consumers would see that as valuable, right? The key, as Michael pointed out and Jason, is there has to be a way to opt out of that.
Yeah.
So there's a sign here that says time's
Time
up,
is
which
up.
I think means we're done. And I know I'm sure we didn't even dent all of your questions. The great news is you can stalk these gentlemen here in the hallways, and they will be happy to answer your most viciously difficult questions. Thank you very much for coming.